you also had popular cultural figures like Father Coughlin, the Catholic priest who pointed to the Jewish origins of Bolshevism. But the real magic though comes in that, so as the Great Depression sets in, everyone's material condition is getting worse. They can see that their institutions aren't working for them, and they know why. So they are alienated from the economy, and they are alienated from capitalism because they see all it does is immiserate them and exploit them to no gain. But they cannot accept the leftist notion that that means capitalism is to blame or that we need socialism, because they've too deeply associated that with this alien other. There has to be another explanation. And so the most popular one, conceived of by folks like Coughlin in the United States, folks like Hitler in Germany, was the unified field theory that fascism created, that said that both Bolshevism and finance capitalism were both controlled by Jews, that the war between them was a phony one meant to undermine Gentile white societies and destroy them from within. It doesn't make any sense, obviously. What is in it for the Jews to destroy the entire material reality that they've built and benefit from? Where is it to their benefit to destroy the thing that creates wealth that they are the ones who control? Why would they do that? And there is no answer to that, because that's the key thing that conspiracy theories do, is that they give you an answer to the ineffable elements of cause and effect and of historical theory and of your understanding of the world. It's like, who can know the mind of the monster? Who can know they're different than us? We can't conceive of what they could want to do. So that just offloads on us the responsibility of making our theory make sense. This contrasts with the Marxist analysis that says people on top want to keep being on top. They want to keep exploiting. They want to exploit resources to their benefit and to their exclusive benefit. And that all of their decision making is based on those incentives. I think that's a more plausible reason or explanation. But that one makes you have to confront capitalism head on, and they didn't want to do that for a bunch of reasons. Culturally and also materially, many of their class interests were with the ruling class. But so people who are squeezed by capitalism, they don't blame capitalism, they blame some manifestation of capitalism secretly controlled by Jews. And that is why August Bebel called anti-Semitism the socialism of fools, because it is someone expressing their alienation, but in an idiotic way and at the wrong target. So that's where the fascist theory of all explanations, which we see picked up now with alt-right guys and all this, like they're all picking up the same thread, which says that all the problems, back then it was communism and finance capital, now it's Islam and finance capital. It's just the same nonsensical story. So that's where that came from. Was born after World War I in the need to break labor power in the United States, frankly. And they were largely successful to our great detriment. The union movement was set back a great deal, and it was only the Great Depression that allowed for rapid mobilization and the ability to extract reforms from capital. Okay, now all of that had to kind of get stowed for the big fight against the Nazis, which, according to a lot of these people who we were talking about earlier, were not the enemy we should have been fighting. But anyway, so there's a brief sort of cessation of hostilities during the Popular Front War against fascism. But of course, as soon as the war ends, the veil has to be brought back down with a vengeance. The connective tissue between world communism and American labor movement has to be cut instantly, so that you get your second Red Scare. Talking John Birch Society blues, that's right. And this was America's just spontaneous, massive rejection of the New Deal and the Cold War sort of state of play, and eventually, over time, civil rights consensus. But it started with a rejection of the New Deal, or an belief that the New Deal had gone as far as it needed to and needed to stop, which is why you had there was a huge strike wave after World War II, directly after World War II, 1946, 47, massive spike in strikes because there had been no strike pledges all through the war, and that had led to this buildup of tensions that all exploded at once. And this led to a huge reaction against the labor movement. And in 1948, there was a massive Republican wave election that gave the Republicans veto-proof majorities to pass the Taft-Hartley Act, which really was the thing that drove the stake in the heart of the American labor movement. It just took years and years for it to bleed out. But that was the political culture of the Red Scare. And in this immediate World War II aftermath, the Jews kind of had to go on the back burner as the villain. Anti-Semitism really took it on the chin with that whole Nazi genocide thing. So the Jewish part of Judeo-Bolshevism went away, and it was just the Bolsheviks, and communists took over that position in culture as the evil force manipulating everything but from behind the scenes. There were some few hardcore dudes like the Reverend Gerald L.K. Smith, who kept it real, as it were, about anti-Semitism and how it was really the Jews responsible, and the Roman Catholics, of course, too, in trying to destroy American virtue. But this was the era of the John Birch Society, of fluoride in the water, the first chemtrails, and the belief that Dwight Eisenhower was a communist agent. So this is the paranoid style that Richard Hofstadter talked about in his seminal book. But this movement was, this strain of conservatism, according to the narratives of conservatives, was definitively destroyed when William F. Buckley publicly distanced himself from the John Birch Society, which, according to conservatives, ushered in an age of reason in the Republican Party and in the conservative movement. Obvious horseshit. I mean, come on, I don't have to tell you people how much horseshit that is, but that's what they said. Instead, that conspiratorial worldview, that seeking of an other to be responsible for all of the ills within society, because there could be no contradictions within American society, that's the backbone of hostility to the liberal order among the disaggregated American reactionary middle class. Okay, so at this point, as you can see, conspiracy theory in the 20th century anyway has been broadly a reactionary movement. It's a movement of the right. It's a movement to make sense of social change by creating scapegoats because it can't confront the real heart of the problem, capitalism. So as a result of that, because of the strong labor movement in the United States, conspiracy theories on the left were relatively muted. People felt like, no, things work out in the open because look at us. We're changing the world with good old collective bargaining. But then the 60s happened. And a new strain of conspiracy theory thinking would now emerge on the left. The difference is that on the left, in this case, there are a lot of real things that happen, actual documented events that gave people a very justified sense of paranoia about what their government was capable of. And I'm not even talking about the big headline-making assassinations of JFK and RFK and MLK. And honestly, even if I am agnostic as to what happened in most of those cases, I have gut feelings, but I really don't feel comfortable making any kind of historical judgment on any of those big ones. But just think about how those things all happening that quickly in succession would make the average person feel like there's no way this is a coincidence. There's no way there are that many lone nuts that just spring out of nowhere to cut down the most prominent people on the left. That just doesn't make sense. So it's understandable. But then we talk about the smaller things that are not debatable, that actually happened. The murder of Fred Hampton by the FBI, COINTELPRO in general, the fucking MK Ultra, okay? This is something that if somebody came out and said it happened now and we didn't know any better, it would sound like a complete fucking sci-fi goof 'em up. The CIA took fucking acid and it's exposed Americans to it in order to observe their reactions as part of a long-term brainwashing experiment to see how tractable the human brain was to suggestion and interrogation. That really happened. One part of it was called Operation Midnight Climax. The CIA rented out a bordello, put two-way mirrors in all the bedrooms, and paid sex workers to douse their fucking clients with LSD and then filmed the results. All of that happened in this time frame. And people didn't know about it all at once, but it's dribbled out ever since. And so this is when most of America was exposed to the real nature of covert operations, the real nature of what it is to be a superpower with a intelligence arm, and how it cultivates the garden of capitalism with just behind the back murder fests and sneaky dealings of all kinds. That's how it lubricates the gears of democracy. It's like covert ops are the lube and the piston between capitalism and democracy, because democracy is necessary to give capitalism legitimacy, but democracy can't be allowed to actually threaten capitalism. And so that's why you prevent the friction from becoming too great by lubricating it with fucking special ops, with intelligence, with state propaganda efforts, covert assassinations, all that stuff. That is how you keep democracy in check. So that's where people get this first exposure. And it leads to a lot of meaningful revelations about the way the state works, but also, really understandably, gives people a desire for grand narratives of conspiracy, which these smaller acts are just parts of. A desire to knit everything together into one satisfying story, which we all have. We've been trained to have it by what we observe in media all the time. This is also the first generation to get conspiracy culture expressed in popular media. This is this led to the 70s, in which you had such amazing, great conspiracy movies as Parallax View, the highly underrated Winter Kills, Executive Action, which is a movie where big Hollywood stars sit around tables and just plan the Kennedy assassination, released 10 years after that event. The fucking Capricorn 1, where they do the fake Mars landing to make the argument that actually it was a fake moon landing. And all of it anchored by a movie about a real fucking conspiracy, All the President's Men. So the 70s is when we get leftist and broad pop culture conspiracy theory as part of the American cultural conversation. And of course, like all culture did, conspiracy theory moved hard right in the 80s, thanks to a little thing we like to call the Satanic Panic. So in the 1980s saw a Reaganite reclamation of American culture from these effete libertines who had become dissipated and perverse. But that led to anxiety. If we are the good homespun folk, how have we been allowing our vital roles as parents to be supplanted by mass media figures from the West Coast and strangers who we give our kids to in terms of the people that we have raised our children? Because the 80s, of course, saw the contraction of possibilities for working class people, the rise of two-earner households where both parents had to work, and that meant kids being sent to daycare facilities. So you don't have influence over your children the way you used to, both in terms of where they spend the day and what they're consuming, because of a popular culture that is not created by anyone that you recognize as having the same values as you. And so the Satanic Panic emerges as a alienation of all of that anxieties into one force. In this case, it's satanic cults, massive satanic cults that in some of these theories and in some of these court cases, because in a lot of cases, bogus accusations of sex abuse at daycare centers led to massively popular, in terms of media attention, trials in which these incredibly outlandish claims were put out, including the idea of nationwide satanic networks of people ritually abusing children, flying on private jets to special sex islands. I mean, if you don't recognize the parallels to QAnon and Pizzagate, then you're a little slow on the uptake. I'm sorry. That is the template that we're going to later see come back with QAnon and with Pizzagate. But it reflects some of the same anxieties about not being the person who influences your children, who guides and protects them. Your sense of feeling powerlessness as a parent. That's what it boils down to.